Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever stopped to wonder how a random, fleeting thought actually turns into a finished novel, or how a quick spark between two strangers morphs into a lifelong marriage, well, there's actually a map for that. Today, we're unpacking the cycle of emergence. We're going to map out exactly how unseen potential transforms into a recognizable, real-world structure in a very honest, straightforward way. But to kick things off, let's ask ourselves, do we really live in straight lines? I mean, human beings absolutely love a clear beginning, middle, and end, right? We're practically wired to think linearly. But we gotta ask if that straight line thinking actually matches the reality of how nature, or culture, or even our deepest personal relationships actually unfold. Think about a project timeline at work, or even just your grocery list. Those are strictly linear. You begin, you develop, you end. And hey, that's incredibly helpful for getting things done. But the absolute deepest processes we experience, like the rising and falling rhythm of our breath, the massive life cycles of stars, or the evolution of complex ideas, those are entirely cyclical. They don't just end and hit a brick wall. They constantly return to seed, brand new beginnings. Now, this brings us to the full 12-stage cycle of emergence. And honestly, don't worry about memorizing all 12 outer steps right off the bat. It's a lot. Instead, let's just focus straightforwardly on the beating heart of this cycle. That's the four broad inner movements: creation, organization, manifestation, and transformation. Just a quick heads up before we break those down, to be totally transparent about the boundaries of this material, this model isn't some rigid scientific theory trying to rewrite the laws of biology or physics, not at all. Rather, it's a symbolic map of becoming. It's a deeply helpful philosophical tool for understanding how things take shape across our lives, from a single creative idea all the way up to complex social systems. Okay, let's jump right into the first overarching movement, creation, and the subtitle says it all. What is beginning? The very first step here is potential, and it is absolutely crucial to understand that potential does not mean emptiness or nothingness. It's actually a profound fullness before any parts separate out. Think of it like the pregnant silence in a concert hall right before the symphony begins, or a completely blank page before writing. It's the unseen right before form takes shape. Creation then moves swiftly through three rapid steps. From that pure potential emerges a difference. This is the very first contrast, kind of like a single drop of dark ink hitting a clear glass of water. Because without difference, there's literally no information. Finally, we get to spin. This is where that new difference acquires actual direction or orientation. So the idea isn't just sitting there anymore, it's got real momentum. Which leads us perfectly into movement 2, organization. Things are no longer static, so we have to ask, how is this beginning to relate? This is where the absolute magic of relationships begins. That initial direction we just talked about becomes dynamic through repeating oscillation. Think of a heartbeat, a steady rhythm. Then it finds alignment through phase relation. Timing is everything here. It's like speaking a hard truth to a friend at exactly the right moment. And when multiple rhythms align perfectly like that, we achieve meaningful reinforcement, known as resonance. The relationship becomes a truly recognizable pattern. This whole organizational phase culminates in topology. Now, topology is a stage where connectivity becomes way more important than shape. Whether you're looking at a family unit, a neural network, or a local community, the actual connections between the parts matter far more than how they look on the outside. The structure is basically beginning to hold memory. And all of this brilliantly builds into the third movement, manifestation. We finally get to ask, what stable form is actually appearing in the real world? So those patterned relationships we just explored, they have to somehow manage to survive real-world disturbances. And when they do, they achieve persistence. They endure. That persistence eventually solidifies into an observable structure. This is the exact point where the unseen finally becomes visible. It's your finished creative project, a legally formed organization, or even just a hardened daily habit. Now, a super helpful takeaway here is that we often confuse persistence with rigidity. But healthy persistence is like a willow tree in a storm. It survives through adaptive continuity. It bends without breaking, carrying the core of the pattern forward while gracefully adapting to change. Rigidity, on the other hand, is just resisting change so completely that the structure eventually shatters under the pressure. Persistence is flexible, but rigidity, it's just brittle. This brings us to the fourth and final movement, transformation. What is changing, dissolving, or becoming possible next? The reality is, structures don't just exist in a vacuum forever. They interact, and those interactions spark brand new differences, creating completely new possibilities. Eventually, over time, even the most established pattern loosens up. It dissolves, initiating a return to potential, which basically feeds all its integrated information right back into the wider field of possibility. In our modern culture, we have this habit of treating endings as failures. But honestly, this model shifts that perspective. A return to potential is not an erasure. It is absolutely not a meaningless collapse. It's a graceful integration. The lessons learned, the memories created, the energy spent, they all return to seed the future cycles. Every end really is a new beginning. So let's talk about a map for life and how we actually apply the cycle practically. The rubber really meets the road when we see how this map shows us exactly how things take form in everyday life. It applies whether you're navigating the highly repetitive steps of personal growth or trying to trust the early uncertainty of a creative process without forcing it. It works for tending to the living patterns of a relationship or even building knowledge from initial confusion all the way to a clear, structured understanding. Ultimately, the overarching truth of this material is captured so elegantly right here. The universe is not a linear story, but a living cycle. Each end is a new beginning. We are participating in a constant, living rhythm where form itself is simply a relationship that has endured for a time. Pretty wild to think about, right? So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this. Look at your own life right now, your creative projects, your deepest relationships, your personal goals. Where exactly are you on this map? Are you lingering in potential, building resonance, manifesting a structure, or gracefully returning back to the start? Pinpointing exactly where you are might just be the absolute key to realizing your very next step. Thanks so much for joining me.